Thanks for joining us today, guys. For those of you who haven't logged into one of the live Q&As and workshop series, today we're fortunate enough to have the co-directors at Athletes Authority, Lachlan Wilmot and Karl Goodman, and Alex Natera, the strength and power coach for GWS Giants. And I'm sure all of you will have watched their presentations. They were phenomenal in regards to what they're currently doing in their environment. But for those of you who haven't been aware of what we've been doing with the Evolve Performance online series, is we're trying to create a platform for sharing knowledge and making sure that we're trying to use this period of uncertainty to improve everyone's capacity to learn from each other and share their experiences. The way that we're doing that is through creative discussions and providing opportunities for practitioners to share their ideas, their experiences, and possibly their influences around high performance and sports medicine. And that's being done by different formats like what we've got here today, but then also some pre-recorded presentations and some live webinars. So last week we had Phil Graham-Smith, John Wagle and Paul Tafari presenting on some force plate integration, and over the coming weeks we also have an Olympic series and a leadership series that will be rolling out. So today we have the live Q&A, but you will have seen the on-demand presentations with a follow-up live panel and then the live webinars, as I just mentioned. All of those are available follow-up via the Evolve Performance website. So if you have registered, you will be able to watch their presentations retrospectively and or this Q&A. So wanted to thank everyone for their time this morning, and once again thank Lachlan, Karl and Alex for their time. Putting together the presentations takes hours of preparation and then also the delivery of it. So the amount of work and effort that's gone into it has been phenomenal. And the questions that we've had coming through have been really interesting as well, because I think with what we've got out of the guys, there's a combination of questions around maintaining engagement, but then also making sure that we're trying to improve performance as well. So I'm going to open it up initially around more so a few questions we had around the educational component of trying to how you guys went about educating your athletes, of how important it was to maintain training during this time. Alex, you highlighted some really important components around residual training effects and how possibly you need to use it or lose it. So maybe Karl and Lachlan, I'll start with you guys. How did you go about, you spoke about going back to basics, engaging your athletes in them understanding the importance of continuing to train?
To be honest, from our point of view, it was obviously a little bit of education, but it was also quite easy in the fact that our athletes were so desperate to find a solution for training that it probably wasn't as much about us trying to educate them on why they should train, but supply them with a solution on how they can train, because they sort of coincidentally we'd built out a brand new block. Obviously, it's probably to dial back a little bit. We changed a lot of our structures, having had two coaches move on to other opportunities. So we just started week one of a brand new training block that I'd been building up for a long time and building the excitement around and stuff like that. And literally we got underway, and 4 days in, we go into this COVID shutdown. So I think it's probably a bit about a cop-out answer, but I really feel that the best way to create athletes' excitement and drive to train is to already have it there. You can't suddenly turn an athlete into some driven athlete now that everything's shut down. You've got to have had that education prior. You've got to have had that culture prior where they're desperate to train and they want to train. And that's what made it so easy for us, because that's what we build into our athletes every day, that desire to train. So when they're told they can't train, it's not actually that hard to get them motivated to train. It's the finding the solution for them on how to train. And I think I mentioned it a little bit in the presentation, is the best way to do that is to try and create as little barrier to success as possible. And from mine and Karl's standpoint, that was supplying as much equipment to them as possible. Yeah, if you've got a paper clip and a piece of string, it's a little bit hard to try and create a program for these guys to train out of. And it's probably selfish, but the more equipment we give them, and any coach knows, it's easier for us. You know, if we can afford to get them a barbell, that makes our life a lot easier for programming. Instead of saying, well, you know, go fill up a 1 gallon water jug and tie it to a broomstick, and like all these type of things just creates a nightmare for us. It can be done, and there's a lot of people out there doing it. But if I can find for $150, get them a barbell, trust me, we're going to spend $150 on a barbell. But I think I'll let Karl continue with from his perspective. But for us, it was more not necessarily driving that excitement around training or that drive. It's creating no barriers so that drive doesn't drop. I think that's probably a distinct difference for us.
Yeah, and a conversation I had with a lot of the athletes was around future pacing. So it's a concept that you use in marketing or in sales to take someone from their current position, which is, you know, in the midst of COVID, and take them to a future position X amount of time in the future, which in this case would be when gyms come back, when sport comes back. So a conversation I had is, look, essentially there are two ways you can spend your time. You can put on the coasters, you control, and you can float for the next 6 months and do a few squats here and there, go for a run here and there, go for a jog, etc. Or you can look forward for 6 months' time when sport does come back and make a decision about where you want to be then. Now, you've got this chance to really take advantage of this time, knowing that a whole bunch of athletes aren't going to take advantage of this time. So do you want to be ahead when sport does come back, or do you want to be with the rest of the pack? Now, if you can future pace, and this comes back to the education side, if you can future pace your athletes to make decisions now for their future, it's going to be really easy to kind of get that motivation that Lachlan was speaking about. So in terms of kind of answering that question, if you have been battling with the education side of getting them engaged, then future pace them. Ask them where they'd like to be in 6 months' time. Ask them, you know, in 6 months, Sarah, hey, do you want to look back on this time and be proud of your effort? Or do you want to look back on this time and wish you did something differently? Because we're giving you a chance to do it differently. And it's really up to you now to decide how you want to spend your time.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. Where do you want to be? Alex, did you find anything different with your guys in the high performance sport realm? Sometimes every team has guys who are intrinsically motivated and other guys who maybe need a little bit more. How have you found that balance?
Yeah, so in the elite sport side of things, I mean, in our context, we obviously had a stop straight away, but we didn't know when we were coming back. So it was actually, the boys had finished the whole preseason and they were ready to go. So it was actually one of those situations where the boys were like, well, we're not going to start back from zero. That's one thing for sure. And we also don't know whether we're playing in 4 weeks' time or not. And we still don't know when we're playing. So it was pretty easy not to completely put the handbrakes on for the boys because they knew something was potentially about to happen. There were some little birdies chirping in guys' minds about the running component more than anything, not so much the strength and power side of things. They're really happy to keep going with that. But the running side of things, they were very nervous around what sort of programs they were going to receive, I think the quote was, I can only go to the well so many times. So some boys, we'd pushed them hard over a pre-season. There's only a finite, amount, and we can keep pushing them, certainly from a motivational perspective as well. So it was very much around the running component, how we were going to sort of come off to come back onto it. And, we know we're going to have about a 3 or 4 week, when the shackles are unleashed, we know we're going to have about a 3 or 4 week period. So, and they know that too. So it's a matter of just keeping them bubbling along, getting ready, rather than regressing, keeping them where they are. And so in terms of directly answering that question, it was a pretty easy sell. And in fact, they were self-motivated in that respect, and happy to keep going to a certain degree.
Yeah, and for you, obviously, when we talk about performance and injury prevention, the risk that we have once we come back, as you demonstrated in your presentation, is around some of the possible soft tissue or tendon adaptations if guys aren't possibly, completing their program to the level that you would like. Did you manipulate what you felt your ideal program was to, I guess, what you feel the minimum amount that they needed to do to stay resilient for when they come back, or have you put it in front of them and thought, well, no, we've got a group that I feel will complete the majority of our program?
So we had two options, and I know some other clubs took the option we didn't take, and it was to go through another little mini pre-season. We decided to keep going on with the in-season, if you like. So we just started, obviously, first round, and we were into that in-season cycle. So we kept going with that in-season cycle. So everything at the moment, I'm sure I won't get in trouble for saying it, but everything at the moment is just like we would be getting ready to play on a Saturday. And so we've kept that going all the way. So everything is still in there in terms of the loadings that we want them to achieve throughout the week, the recovery we want them to achieve throughout the week, when the strength sessions sit, what we're trying to get out of the strength session, what we're trying to get out of their general preparation or resilience type work. So that's all still in there. And there's not been a big change. Now, if the AFL announce next weekend that we won't play till August, then there'll be definitely a deload period to reload them appropriately back into whatever that starting date is.
Yeah, great. Lachie and Karl, you guys have a variety of athletes. You have team sport athletes, individual athletes. Some of them may actually not have any competitions for the foreseen future. How are you going about programming for those type of athletes? Have you based it off physical capacities that they need to develop? Are you going through traditional kind of periodization models, or how have you approached that?
Yeah, answer is yes to everything, because we certainly have we have track and field athletes that were hoping to have one more big national trial, and then that got canned. So they basically start an early off season, because realistically, unless something dramatically goes wrong, their season should still all line up as normal. They'll start competition back in their normal months, so they're probably still following a similar trend. We've got a number of rugby union, rugby league guys that started in preparation to potentially go back with a 4-week notice, but now a lot of the second-tier leagues and below have all been cancelled anyway. So they're in a big off-season position where we will focus on, A, things that they need as an individual, but B, their sporting context as well. So, we've got everything from on-feet conditioning work to off-leg conditioning work to strength programs, plyometric programs, sort of everything intertwined in between that's being dissipated amongst everyone that we've got. And then we've got people that are going to be trialing for Olympic work that's now been delayed. So their periodization changes based off that. We've got a Taekwondo fighter that's now thinking she might fight at a lower weight and compete for Olympic trials. So then you change that again. And I suppose the answer for simplicity point is we're doing everything for everyone, because they're really on a whole heap of different schedules. It is all over the place a bit. And probably what is the hardest thing for us to balance is it's not like we have 15 athletes that are all in the same direction. I think our biggest cohort of the same sport on the same sort of schedule is probably about 10. Other than that, we've got everyone in between. So, yeah, everyone is on a different periodization structure based off that. But we also try and keep some similarities, especially in the way we're set up now with the competitive nature of trying to give people drive. Like, we will try and line up programs as best as we can so they feel like they're doing programs with each other. They're not just on their lonesome doing themselves. But for you guys that work in team sports, you know that some people love doing the same program as everyone else, and other people hate if there's even one exercise similar to the other group because they want to be different. So, we also cater to that. Sorry, Karl, you're going to say something?
Just to add to that as well, yeah. This is kind of where we were in a very fortunate position that our systems that Lachie had essentially been developing over the past, say, 10 years really helped us out. We had systems for plyometric development, systems for off-feet and on-feet conditioning, systems for our strength and power progressions. And what that meant in a time like COVID, we weren't having to worry about that stuff. We can plug and play these systems and adapt them as need be and focus on everything else. That allowed us to engage, connect, and stay in close proximity to the athletes and what they wanted, and not have to worry about complete transformations of programs. So I think that is probably a good point there, is that it really did help facilitate a smoother transition, because, you know, nothing really changed for our athletes. They still did their plyometric velocity blocks. They still did their strength and power blocks. All of those things were already underpinned in what we did. And that, on kind of recollection or reflection, was a massive help for us. So if you haven't done that, certainly use this time to at least start to establish what your systems are within your programming, because it makes a massive difference.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's a common quote used in kind of rehab reconditioning components is keep plan B as close to plan A. And definitely from watching both of your presentations, that seems to be what both of you guys have tried to apply in each environment, is even though the resources may not be there, make sure the program is as efficient and individualised, as adaptable as what they would expect if they were in the facility with all of the equipment at their exposure. But we have a question from Kerry, which probably touches a little bit on the training toolkit side of things. So in regards to training on a budget, their athlete packs consisted of one dumbbell, one kettlebell. Can you guys see any issues or areas to be wary of in regards to doing too much unilateral work or a lack of compound work? And Alex, I might direct that to you initially, because with some of your stuff, you highlighted some of the isometric work and the unilateral work. What do you see with that question?
Yeah, I don't think there's an issue doing too much unilateral work, to be honest. The issue, and I'm not sure, if I read more into that question, I wonder if we're more talking about the fact that we just don't have enough load with a dumbbell and a kettlebell. And in that respect, I'll just refer you straight back to the crux of my presentation, which was around finding avenues to be able to get high neuromuscular outputs. And that is essentially a visit down to Bunnings, or if you don't want to get down to Bunnings yourself, just to order it in and get it delivered, and getting a tie down where you can express maximal forces against it. So yes, so for me, yes, you're not going to get your double leg squats in and your double leg power expressions of power in, but you can make shift it certainly. And to do unilateral work probably for most people's programs, it's probably a nice avenue, a nice time to be able to focus more unilaterally, and still get, like I said through my presentation, still get really, really high neuromuscular outputs. So yes, succinctly to answer your question, I don't think you can do too much unilateral work, but yes, of course you'll miss your squat and your cleans and so on. And when you get back to them, you will have regressed slightly with that exercise, but you won't have regressed with your neuromuscular output, if that makes sense. So the skill of a squat, a front squat and a power clean will have diminished somewhat if you don't have that equipment. But again, that's just an isolated exercise. That's not what you need to perform at your sport. So take courage in the fact that if you're doing high intensity unilateral work, you're probably hitting two birds with one stone. You're able to iron out any kinks in asymmetries, if you like, and you're also able to still hit really high neuromuscular outputs.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's actually, I think, an exciting opportunity for some strength coaches to possibly have to challenge their philosophy and their methodologies around always having, say, bilateral movements within their program. If your athletes don't have that ability to have larger amounts of load for that bigger compound work, yeah, the use of your bilateral isos or your unilateral isos and then other unilateral work is really valuable. And as Lockie and Karl touched on, the use of then even blood flow restriction, possibly with lower intensity work to help mitigate some of that loss of strength. Lockie, Karl, did you have anything to add in regard? Your training toolkits seem pretty extensive in regards to you were able to get you spoke about actually expanding your business and spending $25,000 to then redistribute. Before you'd done that, what did your kits look like before you started to spend that money?
We've got a fairly obvious split in our athletes around who is probably an LTAD style athlete versus some of our more senior athletes. So it was pretty easy for us to effectively, allocate our barbells, our trap bars, and our plates to our more senior athletes. And I'm sure you probably did it the same in AFL. There, your more senior boys get the pick of the equipment, but these guys we were able to kit out these guys with barbells and trap bars versus our LTAD guys, which we've got some 11, 12-year-old track and field athletes that they just simply don't need a barbell. Like there's so many exercise options for them that don't require a barbell. Therefore, they get a dumbbell, they get a kettlebell, they get more bands, whatever it might be. So we did end up doing pretty well in being able to split our entire gym. Obviously, we then added to that by hunting the black market of what was a very crazy time amongst the fitness industry. I felt like a bit of a drug dealer, me and Karl driving around in vans, trying to ring everyone we knew. We had phones going off, didn't know what the number was. I was answering it. There was just some bloke called Muhammad that was ready to sell me something. So it was a crazy time, but to be honest, it was a bit of fun. And we took it under ourselves to try and just, as I said, kit them out with as much as possible because it made our job easier. So I think to come back to Kerry's question a little bit, I certainly don't think there's any issues around unilateral work. I don't think there's any issues around bilateral work. I don't think there's an issue there at all. It just comes back to the creativity of the strength coach and how they're going to actually apply it. But also knowing your athletes, knowing that if you've got a 110 kilo rugby player, you're probably going to need more than just a band to get him through doing stuff like 100 air squats. It's just not going to cut it. And I know a lot of people are doing their best to put out these body weight programs and stuff. And something's better than nothing. But if you're a front rower and you're doing air squats for the next 4 months, I reckon you're probably going to come back a little bit underdone. So it would be in your best interest to try and hunt down as much external load as you can to be able to do the best optioned exercises, whether that be unilateral, bilateral. And I think most of our presentations, including Alex's, has covered a lot of the solutions that we sort of came up with to try and do that. So I don't know if Karl wants to add to that.
Covered it.
Alex, did you guys redistribute any of your gym to any of the guys that stayed in Sydney for I guess, some loaded compound work on top of some of the isometric and the extensive power work that you spoke about in your presentation?
Yeah, a lot of what I spoke about in my presentation isn't applicable to our guys because they've got their kit. So if you go into our gym at the moment, there's not a lot there. There's not a lot there at the moment. So guys literally within 24 hours brought trucks and whatnot into the club, and we loaded them up all with, depending on who they were, anything from 150 to 250 kilograms for each training hub. So we set up, probably shouldn't go too far into detail in this one, but we set up quite a few training hubs in Sydney. And then also made sure the boys that were interstate were also able to access. So I think out of our 46-man squad, I think only 3 of them have got a program where they can't necessarily get higher loads in, and therefore some of this stuff applies to those guys. But yeah, the 99, 97, 98% or whatever of the squad have got plenty of load.
First rule of Fight Club, mate, don't talk about Fight Club.
That's right.
Yeah, no, we were similar at the Lions. You literally walk into ours, and I think there's a couple of the CD discs, the 1 kilo plates and the 0.5 kilo plates that are still in there. But outside of that, the entire facility is bare. And we've actually had some interesting photos being sent around some of our conversation about guys who have actually built their own bench racks and squat racks out of wood from Bunnings, and a bit of a competition through a few of the boys of who is the best, who has the best carpentry skills, and then what they've done creative wise with loading the bar as well. So some better blocks on barbell. I'm not looking forward to seeing the state of what some of these barbells are going to return in. We may need to actually purchase a whole entire gym, because the leasing out, they may not come back into crack shot or nick, but we'll wait and see.
Mate, I'm also concerned about the inventory list. I'm not sure how accurate that is as well. So there could be a few home gyms permanently. There'll be a few pieces of kit down, I think.
Yeah, no doubt. One of the next questions we had, which around kind of providing variety and fun within the program while still maintaining a high performance program. Lachlan and Karl, I know you've got the Rona Rebels versus the COVID Curlers and the ongoing, I guess, challenges that you've done within that. Have you got some other variety within the program, or have you found that kind of internal competition between you two as coaches and then as athletes has been what you've needed to continue to create some buy-in?
Yeah, well, I think firstly, I got the wool pulled over my eyes. I reckon Karl stacked his team without me knowing it, because they took it out again this week, which is a disgrace. He's like, "Oh, we should do a 1 kilometre run. Let's try something like that." Forgetting he's got a national running champion in his group, but so that hurt. But other than that, mate, yeah, look. To be honest, mate, it's going to probably be pretty boring, our answers, but it sort of comes back to what we were saying before is now that although we're in a different environment, that doesn't mean that we then get so wild with things that every day is different. We have a strong philosophy in keeping consistency within training blocks. We believe that we need to be consistent in our delivery of the majority of our exercises to create change, to create adaption, and that doesn't change when they go home. So we're running off effectively 4-week blocks at the moment. So these athletes know that they've got 4 weeks of consistent training. Our programming principles run in a bit of a tiered thing. Our A sequence going to be our key lift. That is the most consistent, stays the same for the longest. Our B sequence is a little less specific, can be a little bit more variable, but still quite a key lift. And then our C sequence is a little bit more of a capacity block and much more accessory based and can change a lot more. So just the same as we would if they were training out of Athletes Authority at the facility. We will keep good, strong blocks with consistent training, trying to expose them to some consistent load and movements. We will start to develop and periodise those C sequences more and give them probably more creativity, more adaptation. But our A sequence, B sequence does remain fairly consistent over 1 to 2 blocks at a time, and then updates from that. So we try to give them variety in probably their conditioning a little bit. We change that a little bit more than we do our strength, and we also obviously create these challenges that are completely non-specific to anyone, and there's no doubt some people are going to be better at them than others. It's just the way it is. If you try and come up with a challenge that's going to be equal for everybody, you'll be sitting on your hands for months because you'll never figure it out. So as long as we keep changing, we'll have some aerobic challenges, some strength challenges, some movement challenges, things where everyone hopefully will get a challenge where they go, you know what, I can actually win this. That's the key to it. But when it comes to actual programming, we are as creative and we are as stimulus changing as we would be if they were in our facility day to day.
And Lockie, just to add to that philosophy, if you're having to incentivize your clientele, whether general populations or athletes or a mix, with rewards all the time, in this case, fun and variety, there's actually something wrong with your global solution. You shouldn't need fun and variety in the same way a dog doesn't need a treat to sit for the rest of its life. You shouldn't need to provide that type of fun and variety for your athletes. If you're focused on the goal, if you focus on the processes, the routines and the habits that will give them the best chance of pursuing that goal, then you shouldn't need it. At least that's my opinion. Maybe a little bit of engaging stuff like we're doing with the weekly challenges, but it shouldn't look radical. And if it does look radical to you, then I think you probably would be better off reassessing conversations with your athletes around what they're trying to achieve and how they want to get there, rather than trying to make it look like a circus act.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, Karl. And if guys listening haven't watched Simon Thomas's presentation from last week, he made some great points around that and getting guys to understand the opportunity and that this is the new normal. And so it's not about necessarily getting creative or trying to reinvent the wheel. It's just about making sure we understand what it is that people need to achieve during this time to either make them consistent performers or better people. Alex, the demographic with I guess in AFL is guys are used to training together and training in groups, and so when you've got this almost internal drive from being around 46, 47 other males, there's this constant internal motivation from being around the group. How have you found trying to engage and connect them? Have you found guys have been kind of wavering in and out of that, or has the group stayed pretty committed?
From a group level, they've stayed pretty committed so far, but it's only early days. I don't know how long this is going to go for, so it could become more challenging as it goes. But, ultimately, you've got your drivers within the group and you've got to access and use them. You've got your leaders, and in our club, we've got quite a few leaders, and luckily they're spaced around interstate. We've got lots of opportunities to communicate and connect with each other. And we do that on a daily basis, particularly the guys who aren't stood down. So we've still got some staff, skeleton staff working. And because this isn't an off season where we're not allowed essentially to be in contact with the players, they're working, they're still working. So we're in contact with them every day and adjusting programs accordingly. I have myself, written, against my whole philosophy of programming, written 3 different blocks there. So they've got their goals, they've got things they can stick to, they know where they're going. I've probably been even more goal orientated in this environment, around maybe just changing the loading up to go, okay, we're actually going to hit real new PBs then, or what about a challenge on, again, not changing the program entirely or looking at making it a fun program, still very performance driven, but maybe changing the goalposts a little bit, where certainly in this period of time, we probably wouldn't have been going for hitting new PBs or giving new challenges based on a particular exercise. But now I'll be a bit more like, okay, in 4 weeks' time, let's have your dumbbell shoulder press at this level. What do you reckon? Engage them in that sort of fun element. Fun meaning competitive, which these guys are hardwired to do. So that's generally how we're catering for it. Communication almost on a daily basis, in multiple ways, whether that's a written communication, phone calls, massive Zoom sort of meetings, just like this, where you'll have 50 odd people on there, coaches and players, and just working together around the motivation. And I'm sure that will change, but at the moment we've got lots of committed boys, not knowing when this season's going to start, but getting ready to get on with it. And we've also got lots of staff that are keen to keep pushing as well. So, and besides that, the hubs are working an absolute treat. Social distancing, with regards to social distancing, but the hubs are working a treat.
Yeah, no, I think that's great information from all of you, definitely. Andrew has an interesting question around how do you know if you're creating adaptations if we're not collecting data? So obviously, data collection and the use of technology is common practice these days, and some of us use it to better inform how our programs change. We may just use it to see how our athletes are tracking. Are you guys using any technology at the moment to engage with athletes around that perspective? Lachie and Karl, with any of your guys? Yeah,
look, obviously we're used to using many a product at our facility. Namely a few products like Force Decks available at Val Performance, and the groin bar also available at Val Performance, and then also the Nord board is also available at Val Performance. All jokes aside, look, to be honest, mate, I love collecting data, I really do, but at the end of the day, I've always been the type of person that will never let that get in the way of me programming. I think Alex can attest to a man that we know quite well, Dean Norris, who usually will do anything he can to get data, including manipulating every program in the world just so he can get nice, consistent data. But I've always been a believer in, the program comes first, data will come second. And I think the answer to that is, we do not have the capabilities to test what we normally test. Simple as that. And if you're trying to find out a novel way of getting a mid-thigh pull done with people in an external environment, you're just banging your head against the wall. So that's not to say we don't collect data, because there's a lot of data out there you can collect that you don't need technology for. For us, for example, with a number of athletes, I'll collect basic RPE, session scores, soreness, all that type of stuff that you'd normally collect. We also obviously use Team Builder with all of our athletes, and that's a very easy way. Every day we collect what they're lifting, how many reps they're doing, tonnages and everything like that. How do we manipulate that? It is probably a new and novel way of doing PBs, but nonetheless, we still create PBs for different exercises based off where they are, what they're doing. We can still prescribe loads off that. Now, is it the gold standard that you'd see in a beautiful facility setting? Obviously not, but that's not to say you're not getting valuable data that you can use, manipulate, program from, and make decisions from. So certainly don't use technology as an excuse as to why you can't get data through.
The other question I might add, sorry, who asked that question?
That was Andrew. Yep.
Andrew, I guess the question I'd have back to you, just as a thought, is if you were back in the 1960s and you're a strength and power coach for an Olympian, what else would you do? Like, you would still have to make decisions under uncertain context. You don't know what's going to happen with your program until you see it kind of show up and as you go. So whilst it's nice to have the data, it shouldn't prevent you from making the best decisions with what emerges over time. So that would probably be the other thing that I'd add to that.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And even just certain, you may revert back to some basic tests that you wouldn't be necessarily using now, but have been used in the past, say broad jump for distance, and everyone can measure with a tape measure. Or I remember back in my basketball days when I was trying to dunk, just standing up, use the chalk above my head, mark it on the wall, and then jump again and dash the chalk line and measure that. And
I heard you're still trying, are you?
Yeah, still trying. But unfortunately, at 5'11", my verticals dropped a little bit. But even using components like that, smart watches as well from a recording of, if you, like you guys mentioned about the 1 kilometre time trial, yes, there's going to be error within components of it, but what you're looking for is, you're not looking for necessarily the most reliable data. It's a way of continuing to engage with the athlete and assess them and possibly give them some goals along the way. Alex, do you have any other forms of technology? You mentioned the MyJump app that with some of the jumping stuff. Are you using that with some of the guys, or any other technology at all with your athletes?
No, not with our guys. I've certainly put it out there for them to want to, and I can guarantee not one of them will want to do it. So
not for $15, mate.
Not $15, exactly. We'll leave it at that comment. Yeah, definitely. So it's up to them to get it, but I know they're not interested in it. And to be honest, we've got no technology out there being used at the moment, and I don't have a burning desire to get that technology out there to them. Yes, we collect a lot when they're in-house, but I'm pretty confident that I know the boys well enough to have them in their individual programs and then giving me the data back where they're going to be at. And I'll back myself and them in that our first week back, when we do some monitoring and do some testing, we're going to be in the ballpark as long as they stick to the programs. If you don't know your athletes that well yet, you might have a new cohort and whatever. Okay, then you're going to be shooting in the dark a little bit, and you don't know where you're going to go. You don't know how they're responding necessarily. You'll get their loads back, but you won't know enough. But I think once you've been working with athletes for a fair period of time, you'll know where they're going to be at. based on what stimulus you're providing them.
Yeah, and even some of the research you showed in your presentation, but also some of the other research out there around detraining following, maximal strength protocols. There's actually some evidence to show that possibly, let's say, some of our athletes maybe miss a session or maybe not lift the intensity we expect. As long as they're providing some form of consistent stimulus, they may actually then supercompensate and benefit down the track. So if you aren't measuring now, once we get back, and actually, Alex, I'd be interested, and Lockie as well, if you guys had thought about, if this period extends out another month, have you thought about possibly bringing individuals in maybe who are in particular you want to keep an eye on, and doing some performance testing and then letting them go away at all, or just trust that the program's getting done, and when you get back, you'll perform those assessments?
No, there's definitely talk. Oh, sorry.
No, you go.
There's definitely talk of bringing some guys in, absolutely. But we're going to be partly governed, obviously, by the governing body. Will let us know what we can do. But certainly, if some of these restrictions release slightly, I'm pretty confident that we'll be bringing small groups in for some sort of testing, certainly from a medical screening perspective. But we'll also dovetail some of our performance testing in with that as well. Again, it's just too hard to tell, but there has been talk about that for sure.
Yeah, from our point of view, it's it's probably walking the line to have people come into our facility, although it is open for physiotherapy, which is obviously all above board. We probably wouldn't bring people into facility just based off just government regulations. But as you probably know, valid performance products are very versatile in the way they get moved around. So perhaps we could take a Nord board and a groin bar to someone else's house, because home visits are allowed. You are allowed to do one-on-ones. So that is a potential option. The question is, the end of the day, all jokes aside, I just don't know if it would govern my program. Like I just don't think I'd change my program if the data came back. And as an example, if you're doing even just a Nord board, if someone's Nord board drops a little bit, maybe we add a little bit more hamstring volume in. But at the end of the day, they've already got hamstring volume in. I don't expect it to. And to be honest, I think it's probably just trying to tick a box when it perhaps doesn't need to be.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's once again, it comes down to probably the assessments you guys are doing within your program. You're doing them because you either want to assess the change that's occurring, or you're doing them to alter your program slightly. And so if you don't think that that's necessary, then the reason for testing possibly isn't necessary. I'm actually personally looking forward to seeing the difference in some of our guys who I know haven't had the ability to be exposed to compound lifts versus the guys who had. And actually, because we were at the end of pre-season, we did all our end of pre-season kind of performance assessments and in-season assessments. So I've got this really great profile of where the guys started at pre-season, where they were at end of pre-season, leading into round one. And then now I have this opportunity that we would never, ever have had, where I know some guys aren't getting exposure to large compound stimulus, but they're doing some form of isometric, like from Alex's program, and a lot of plyos to supplement that, and some higher volume work. And then I have other guys who I know are trap barring heavy, RDLing heavy, and doing kind of some plyos as well. So actually comparing those groups, while, possibly I won't have as much information around the volume and tonnage perspective that I might like, it's still going to be a great little internal review of, all right, what we're doing week to week in our current program, do we actually still need to be implementing the volume that we do, or have we seen enough from these guys that have maintained their strength that we can actually review what we're doing? And I'd be open to what you guys think around that. Is this going to be an opportunity for all of us as performance coaches to actually continue to tease out what's the minimal effective dose that we need to apply to keep guys healthy and improve performance?
I think it's a win-win situation for the coach managing, because the football manager, they all get weaker. You go, see, they can't do it without me, so you need me. If they all get stronger, they're like, see, how good am I at programming, mate? You can't do this without me. If it wasn't for my program, they wouldn't have gotten stronger. So I really think it's a win-win situation if you've still got a job.
Yeah, look, I think so. And this is obviously an unheard of position that we're in, and I'm not talking globally, but just in sport. So what traditionally we'll come off an off season, and certainly some coaches will put in sort of ironing out the kink type programs where you'll work on certain muscle groups that you mightn't have before. You might be concentrating on muscles before movement in a certain phase. You might be doing more unilateral work before you can do heavy work, all that sort of stuff. But now we're in this situation where we've gone and finished 12, 16 weeks of preseason and got all of our athletes to a certain level that we're really happy with them to go into a season and last the duration of the season. So now we're all of a sudden got this really cool environment where we've got strong, fit, fast, ready athletes, and we're now able to work on more stuff as well. So it presents a really, really novel way of programming that we wouldn't normally be able to do in any sport, in track and field or field sports. So we got, rather than unfit guys coming back from Bali doing bits and pieces to get them ready for the preseason, we're now fit, strong, ready to go, and able to do other exercises still to keep them going and keep them improving. You've almost got a time too to reflect back on your preseason and go, because often we'll get to the end of preseason. I reckon maybe 3 or 4 times in my whole career, I've gone to the end of the preseason and gone, nailed it for the whole squad. Absolutely got it right. They're ready to go. Best shape they've ever been in their lives. But now you've got this situation where actually that guy could have done more of this, or he missed 2 weeks of training because of a little tendon niggle. This guy missed this, and you got this fantastic, unique opportunity out of a pretty poor circumstance to be able to actually iron out any kinks. So you could actually get guys coming back into this particular whenever the season does commence in the best shape possible, and actually have a good chance of really avoiding or mitigating a lot of injuries and increasing performance to another level than what they would have been used to. So it's an opportunity rather than necessarily a negative thing as well, if we can slant it that way.
Yeah, and I guess then the flip side is when we start back, our guys are hopefully going to be more physically prepared or robust for training, but then your reintegration of skills and the complexity of the chaotic nature of Australian rules football and contact and those things, how do you see that impacting on what your program's going to need to look like once we come back into, let's say, that 4-week mini preseason? How do you see that balance?
Yeah, I think that's a key. So all the programs at the moment, and I'm sure all 18 clubs have included football. Everyone's kicking, everyone's doing ground balls, everyone's doing some form of their football training. It won't be to the same extent, but if we are able to keep those elements of footy, league, union, whatever it is, ticking along, so it's not going to be such a novel experience when they come back week 1 and then it's an accelerated mini preseason into the games. If we keep that ticking along and pile all the energy into their running side of things, into their off-feet conditioning, into their strength, into their resilience work, more than we would normally, because it's a natural shift there because they don't have 4 hours 6 hours of on-field training anymore. So naturally, we've almost created an environment for a performance coach, performance specialists, where we can actually concentrate on that side of things, load them up effectively, get them into the best shape possible. So when they come back into their 3-week, 4-week mini pre-season, they can actually hit the ground running, so to speak, with their footy drill and skill work. But for sure, no one, and if anyone not involved in professional teams is out there programming, and they're kind of left to their own devices really, with the head coach or technical coaches not having much of an input. As part of the performance program, you've got to have your athletes, your players doing skill work for football, soccer, rugby, hockey, whatever it is. They have got to be doing that, because that alone, like you suggested and alluded to just then, Selwyn, can be a spike in novel movements, again, back into the system. We take for granted things like kicking and other types of movements that athletes have done since day dot, and would go down to the park with their mate and do it. But it's not at the same intensity. It's not in the same execution levels that there would be when you're actually in a professional environment again, or back with your teammates. So that stuff has to be kept on bubbling along without a doubt. And then we've got to make sure, I mean, I don't go too deep into it, but I mean, if in the program they're doing 100 kicks a week, and they're coming back into their first week of the mini preseason, and they're going to jump to 250 kicks out of 3 or 4 sessions, and we've got to be sensible about that too. We've got to be advising, the coaching format, and I have no doubt all 18 clubs in the AFL are doing that anyway, and very aware of what that's going to look like when and if we return.
Yeah, I agree. I'd probably extend that I'm a massive believer in body hardness and contact progressions and keeping that contact. And I can tell you right now, with social distancing, there ain't going to be much contact going on at the moment. So without overstepping the line from a government standpoint, we've certainly suggested to a number of our athletes that have family members that they are living with to continue contact programs. They have contact programs. A number of them have taken home our hit shields and everything to sustain contact, because I'm a massive believer in it doesn't take long to lose that. And when I was then, I think you guys would have done the same. Whenever you've been a runner on game day and you line up and do a couple of shoulder bumps with boys, you think it's nothing, and then you're freaking sore for 2 days. You realise that it is a learned adaption, and if you're not doing it, you will get very sore, and I reckon you get very susceptible to a lot of things. So that's probably something for us that we sort of hammered home. Obviously, the skill side of it's important, and it's something that they should be doing and they're doing. But the body contact from an injury standpoint, something that we did hammer home for a number of people, especially them, those athletes that are coming back from some shoulder injuries. There are some priorities that we spoke about and gave programs to.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, definitely, Lachlan, because, I agree with holding a hit shield and the difference in receiving contact versus applying contact, and the context within then the decision-making involved in it. I know you guys mentioned you have still some of your coaches doing some one-on-one stuff with your younger athletes, just possibly around more the technical. Are you also incorporating with some of your athletes around decision-making context, whether that being an agility or reactive agility component when they're doing those one-on-ones, or is it more so just around guided strength work?
No, we definitely have. It depends on the athlete. We have a number of athletes that are track and field athletes that are getting worked with. So obviously their decision-making slightly different to a chaotic sport. But as an example, one of our coaches is a big soccer head. He loves it, played it all his life. So we've got a couple of soccer athletes. He's actually not only been doing some running work with them and change of direction, he's actually getting involved with effectively being a bit of a soccer coach, getting some ball involvement, some skill involvement, some decision-making, stuff like that. We obviously try and stay in our lane where we can, but this is a unique environment where they're just not getting any exposure to anything. So even half decent kicks to an athlete's probably better than none at all. So there is where it's appropriate and where there's the opportunity. Our coaches are certainly delving into some typical agility work along with some skill work where they can.
Yeah, great. Well, we might wrap it up there today, guys. We've had some really good input from the audience. I want to finish with just a question to each of the panelists around how you're using this time, both personally and professionally, as an opportunity, and what it is that you're hoping that coming out of the back of this, you're hoping to have achieved. So, Lockie, might start with you. I don't mind if you want to go just personal or professional or both. It's completely up to you. But please share with us.
Personally, there's a hell of a lot of work that I've had to do around the house and construction-wise. So I've got painters and chip rockers walking in and out as we speak. So that's a massive focus of mine to try and get that under control. But I'll probably preface what Karl's probably going to say as well. We've probably, since me coming on board and everything that's been going on, we've got a plethora of ideas around projects and things that need a lot of background work to build out. So we're really using this as a bit of a time to say, well, we're not getting sucked onto the gym floor every hour and programming every hour. We need to use this time to build out a lot of our structures and templates that we want to apply when we get back. So between ourselves, our assistant coaches, our 2 physios that are all obviously kept in the job really nicely with a lot of the stimulus packages from the government, it gives us this opportunity where we're not working as many hours as we would normally do on our key focus area. So we need to now start to do a lot of that background and behind the scenes stuff, whether that be filming content things that we've been trying to do or build out rehab templates we've been trying to do. So that's pretty much our biggest professional focus at the moment. And also cleaning the gym a little bit. I joke around and say I've got 2 wives because both Karl and my wife Dom are as dirty as each other when it comes to leaving stuff around and being messy. And I leave here with empty glasses all over the place, and I get to work and there's a can of Coke that's half drunk on a desk. And so anyway, so the principle of that is to be able to have this time where there's no one in the gym and we can actually clean it out and reset and go again is a really good opportunity. So a little bit of a reset is probably our biggest focus at the moment.
Sounds like you're going to have a heap of gym equipment to find space for as well when you restart as well, mate.
Yeah, so, might just need to get a bit bigger facility, I reckon. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, you guys are definitely setting the template as one of the leaders in the private sector, so I've got no doubt that big things to come. Karl, I know you've been, you shared some of the business mentorship stuff that you've been probably working on both personally and professionally, but anything outside of that as an opportunity, outside of fatherhood as well, mate? Or you got to unmute. You're just going to have to unmute, Karl.
Would you believe he uses Zoom multiple times a day and he's forgotten to unmute?
We'll wait to see if he.
There we go. He's unmuted. Well done.
Oh no, he's still not coming through. So, Karl's AirPods must have lost charge.
How about you move to Alex and then come back to Karl because we can't hear.
Lockie, can you just?
I'll text him, let him know.
Send him a text message. Alex, once you've
there we go. I've unmuted.
Once you've collected yourself from laughter at Karl's expense, please. How are you going, mate? With what you're looking at over the next coming weeks?
Yeah, look, really enjoying reconnecting with the family, if you like, in terms of, our opportunities to do this is normally on holidays, but whereas now, the missus is still working, the boys are off, my 2 boys are off school, so I'm able to spend a lot more time with them outside of homeschooling, even just chilling out with them and playing with them way more than normal. I've always prided myself, that's my big number one job, and my favourite job and the job I aspire to be the best at is being a dad, so I'm getting to practice that a lot now and realise how poor I am and how much better I can be at it. So piling myself into that. Also got a lot of external stuff, a bit like I see what Lockie's schedule is looking like too. My schedule's very similar with things like this which is great, which is always a fun opportunity to give back and to share and whatnot. But it can also be quite daunting, the amount of stuff that you can have on. So got quite a bit more of that going on. It's a good opportunity to reflect. Whenever you get to speak about your program and your philosophies, you're always reflecting and refining. So it's an educational process as well as a sharing process. So I reckon I've got probably another week or week and a half worth of that sort of stuff. And then what I've gone and done is enrolled also in a few TAFE programs, TAFE courses. And I'll say a few. There's 3 that I'm looking at the moment. So
any carpentry? You want to come around this way, mate?
Oh, geez, you don't want to see me with carpentry, mate. Those dowels that I used in my presentation, it took me a long enough time to saw them accurately anyway. So you don't want me, mate.
That's before you've done the TAFE course. Once you've done the TAFE course.
Okay. This is true. No, the TAFE courses are around like leadership and web design, believe it or not, and just different things that just are out of my comfort zone, or things that I want to get better at, or things that I see a potential future in down the track, and or just going through the free courses and things that excite and interest me, and I'll go on to that. So yeah, there's a neuroscience one too that's pretty interesting. But yeah, utilizing the opportunity, and hopefully that will start in a week's time to do some of that. But meanwhile, I haven't checked who the participants are on this list, but just in case my PhD supervisor's on there, I'm also going to be doing lots of PhD work as well.
Yeah, no, mate. Well, you definitely, some of the content you've been releasing over the last couple of years has been world class in the run-specific isometrics, and now obviously the presentation you've done for us. So I've got no doubt people will be tapping you on the shoulder, left, right, and centre to continue to squeeze every bit of knowledge out of you, like what Phil Graham-Smith would say you did to him with your time over at Aspetar and Aspire. So, but no, greatly appreciated. Karl,
have you got me?
Yes. AirPods charged, mate? Yes.
You've got me. It was one of those things where the
back.
AirPods had died. It was using my computer for sound, but still connect to my headphones for microphone. So my apologies about that before. I was losing it near the back end there. So to answer your question, I kind of did a half-assed paternity leave. Lockie wasn't, Lockie was still at Power at the time. So I was still somewhat responsible for governing the ship and leading the ship at AA. So I kind of had a half-assed paternity leave. So I'm actually really enjoying that now and spending more time with Nikki. We're about to get married in about 2 weeks to do one of those maximum of 5 people weddings, which would be very interesting. The convenience side saves a fair bit of money, so I'm not going to complain about that.
It's been waiting just to save money. That's all it is.
Literally, I've taken advantage of this opportunity to not spend $30,000 on a wedding.
I think the line was, let's not let COVID get in the way of love, but it was more just, let's get it done now so I don't need to have 100 people at wedding.
Don't tell Nikki that. I've managed to convince her of the former. So we'll keep running with that. But in terms of professionally, Selwyn, the main thing for us is Lockie and I most people consider us being somewhat ahead of the curve in terms of private sector athlete development. We've still got a far way to go in terms of our systems and our scalability. And something that Lockie and I have been really trying to work on is setting athletes' authority up to essentially be able to plug and play it in any state. And that means a lot of back-end systems and a lot of things that we haven't yet done. So this 6 months is a really exciting time for us because it gives me enough mental space to try and work on those elements and make sure that everything is in place for any kind of larger facility or multiple locations, whatever kind of we go down the 2021-22 route. So that's exciting, and I would recommend that to any coach, whether you're a gym owner or a coach working for an organization or for your own organization. This is an incredible chance to get your back end bulletproofed, refined, and optimized. So if that has been the thing that's been holding you back in your business or professionally, that is what I would be spending my time on, because you're not going to get this chance again. You're not going to get this chance to extract yourself from face-to-face coaching in this way, probably in the foreseeable future, and theoretically generate some revenue from it. Obviously, this is a unique chance if you do it properly, especially with, as Lockie mentioned, all those government grants or whatnot that's coming in. We're essentially getting funded to fix our businesses. When you look at it that way, that's an incredible opportunity. So if you do this right, there's a big pot of gold on the back end for you at the other end of the rainbow. So use this time wisely. I'm spending my time redesigning websites, doing branding stuff, optimizing back-end email automations, building products for scale, you name it, it's getting done. So very exciting times.
That's great, mate. It really is exciting to see what all three of you are doing during this period, and really appreciate your time this morning and your contribution to the Evolve Performance online series. We'll hopefully have you guys involved as we continue to grow out the platform, as it's going to be something that continues well past COVID-19. So thanks for your involvement today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Appreciate it, Sel. Thanks, mate.
Cheers,
Alex.
Cheers, guys. Good to see you guys. Well done, Selwyn, with this. Top work.
Great stuff, mate.
Cheers, guys.